Devconnect is probably one of the top three crypto events for builders. So if you're not sure which conference to pick, because there are probably way too many out there in the world, Devconnect should definitely be on the short list, mainly because it's so research and builder focused.
My key takeaway is probably that unless you are, a top secret trader or shadowy supercoder, you should go to conferences because um, it's a great way to meet people, to of course to network with people. But yeah, it depends on your interests. But it is great just to see how we are growing as an industry.
Welcome to the Deus XDAO podcast.
Hey everybody, this is rture, and we are here with some Deus XDAO members for another Deus XDAO podcast. We are going to chat about our adventures in Istanbul because we went to the Binance Blockchain Week, the Devconnect events, and the ETHGlobal Hackathon. So I'm joined by 0x Cerberus, 0x Kepler, and Chilla. And in the next probably hour, we're going to chat about Istanbul and what we learned there. So maybe we can kick it off, like what everybody's purpose was of going to Istanbul. So maybe we can start with Cerberus.
Yeah, sure. Thanks a lot, Abe, for the introduction there. Yeah, so Istanbul was a lot. I've been there for 10 days, one for Binance Blockchain Week and then for Devconnect. My main purpose uh, was as a representative for LiFi, the project where I'm head of DeFi, and in my role there, I have to talk to partners or potential clients that would use our API or SDK for same chain or cross chain swaps. At Binance Blockchain Week, I was invited as a panel speaker on a very interesting panel, actually, on can CFI and DeFi coexist? And it has been set up like a debate, two people on the DeFi side and two people on the CFI side. I guess that you can guess on which side I was. Obviously, a DeFi maxi. It was quite a nice panel, and the whole conclusion was that they can coexist and that they are coexisting actually for many years now. We've seen examples of real world assets and on-chain lending and people doing both of the two worlds. I don't think that CDFI is actually quite a good thing for the industry. We kind of saw that in the last cycle where many players did fail at that, but I think that both CFI and DeFi can coexist exactly from that perspective of there are a bunch of companies that are doing onboarding into crypto, and crypto is getting even more friendly as we're going. And for Devconnect, it was that one is a bit different because Binance Blockchain Week caters mostly to VCs, market makers, KOLs, people that are very tied to Binance. Whereas with Devconnect, the main audience is researchers, developers, and builders in the Ethereum and EVM ecosystem. I also was at L2 Days as a speaker on a panel of application building from the perspective of L2 scaling, which was interesting because I think that the consensus right now is that there are too many L2s out there, which I kind of agree. Because for LeFi, for example, as an aggregator, it's pretty hard to keep up with all the new hot chains that are hot right now. And in a month, we are not sure if they're gonna be, as cool as they are right now. obviously that's not the case for the big chains like Base or Arbitrum or Optimism, but I think that there are probably too many scaling solutions that are not actually trying to scale Ethereum, that they're just grabbing VC money for the purpose of smoke and mirrors to scale Ethereum. But that's just my hot take. Maybe some of them actually have good tech. And in general, Devconnect, very high caliber of people, a lot of devs. So the discussions were very, very technical, but all in all, it was a great experience. I'll now pass the mic to Kepler, because I think he had probably a different experience, because I know that each and one of us was targeting something different.
Yeah, I was actually kind of like at the opposite spectrum of what crypto offers. I guess you were more on the DeFi side, and for me it was autonomous worlds. So basically, I went to Istanbul on behalf of GG Quest, and they were building like on-chain reputation for gaming, right? So yeah, I was very much focused on the gaming side, and interestingly, in Istanbul, we didn't really have like Web3 or Web 2.5 games. It was only fully on-chain games, so like a niche within a niche. Yeah, so maybe as like a quick primer, fully on-chain games, basically everything happens on-chain. Like the whole logic is in smart contracts. That's like the main selling point. So yeah, as you can imagine, as it sounds like there were a lot of builders as well, and not really a lot of influencers or VCs, because it's just, yeah, like a very young industry still. But I had good vibes there. Like overall, it felt kind of like a LAN party, but for adults. So it's like people go home to shower and then they come back, and you actually have good food there. So you don't eat junk food. You have a good diet, play some games, have some talks, which were also really builder focused. And yeah, I guess for me it was kind of like a business development task, but also not really. Like we weren't trying to hard sell games on working with us. It was more like, yeah, making connections within the industry and showing that we are there to basically help them acquire users and retain users. So yeah, I stayed for like 5 days, so half of what Serp had. Went to a lot of, or like solely to events focusing on fully on-chain games. We also hosted 2 tournaments as well during the week. So I can also talk about that later. But yeah, that was basically my conference. And I'll pass the mic to Chilla.
All right, thanks a lot. Well, first of all, thanks a lot for having me. It's my first time at the Deus External podcast, and it's a pleasure to be there, to be here. And so this was my first time in Istanbul. Actually, it was my first time at a big conference as well. I was there on behalf of the Wales Capital, because I'm an associate there. And so the fact is that I scheduled so many events and many meetings as well. So it was a little bit of a mess, too many things to do. And I went to so many events. I've been there actually only 7 days. Yeah. So yeah, since it was the first time at a big conference, I still had to understand how things were going on. I mean, what kinds of events were the most interesting, and where I could meet the most people. The biggest number of people, because after all, that was my main aim as an associate. So I had to find people, interesting projects, and speak with as many smart people as possible, of course, to learn, because I want to learn as, of course, to grow in the space, and because I wanted to meet great people, because possibly to invest in projects that they are building. And I think that I was able to meet some great people, some very interesting people in the space, building some cool stuff. And yeah, I regret not being able to go to to attend from the beginning to the end some great events, because I was maybe busy doing some meetings with other projects, but it was great overall. It was great to meet you guys. It's great to meet people in real life that you only speak with online. So yeah, it was basically the first experience in this sense. So I'm very happy to have done so. Yep. So I'll pass the word again to Aperture.
Yeah, and I think that's the typical conference vibe, right? There's so much to do, so many events. You just have to pick and choose whether you go to that meeting or you want to go to specific events. Sometimes you even have to calculate where in the city you have to be. Like 2 events are close by, but maybe the one you want to go to is a little bit further away. Like that's all decision making you have to do. But for me, I think I had 2 reasons to go to Istanbul. I think the first one was to attend my first hackathon. I think it was for me a long term goal where I could finally work with some builders on a project and see what we could build actually in a few days and see if we could win some prizes. But that was I think secondary. Just to see what all these hackathons were about and what the builders do in a few days is was something I was already interested in, so I just went for it. And then on the second goal, that was mostly talking to projects to see what they're doing on business analytics and marketing analytics and see how those insights help them run their business or understand their customer, since I see that like in crypto that's not always the case with projects. So just see what the status is on that, and also like connect to data providers that want to work with me, or I want to connect to some projects to help them out. So I think those were the 2 goals. But in between, you meet some friends that you only see online. You meet new people at the events just because you're standing next to them and you introduce yourself, or you see people from previous conferences and you catch up with them. So yeah, that's always some sub goals at these conferences, but that happens the more you go to these. I think on part of the conference planning, like how do you tackle that? And feel free to just jump in. Like Chilla already said, there were a lot of events going on, but how do you actually prepare for such a thing? Like how you search events, how you search for people to meet up with, and even maybe how to decide when you go to the events.
I've been to a few conferences in the last year, and I think that I'm getting closer and closer to the perfect playbook for crypto conferences, mainly because they're all the same, so there's not that much that you can adjust for. But in terms of planning, I'm the kind of guy who signs up for every single event out there, and the night before I just make up my schedule for the next day, so I have options out there. This is for the event planning, which is usually during the morning and during the evening. During the day, I like to have meetings set up before the conference. I think that anyone who works in sales or BD and just says that I'm good at on-site networking is just lazy, and they don't want to set up their meetings before. So I think that that's a very important part, to have the actual objective of being there and meeting 1 to 10 people that you actually want to get hold of and sidebar with them. So that's usually the main part of the day in which you have meetings. During the evening is the actual on the spot networking. It's the events are very specific. Some are for intent, some are for scaling solutions, some are for staking. So depending on what you're looking for, you're going to the events that you are targeting. And another thing that I found pretty useful at conferences, but this really depends on how the venue is being set up, to set up meetings very close nearby to the conference. This works very well in Paris, for example, where there are, two cafes right outside the venue. So, and you can just grab a spot there, and you will know people and you will see people. And instead of, just saying, hi, let's catch up later, you actually have an office there. So you can invite people to hang out with you. So this works, but it really depends on how the venue is being set up. Yeah, and I think that it's the planning is the most important part for conferences. Just going there without any plan or any event in your calendar, it will not make it worth, because you will probably have to chase people and events, because most of them will be sold out or closed, and you will just have to go and try to sneak into those events, which creates more overhead. So yeah, planning is probably the most important part when tackling conferences.
Yeah, I agree with basically everything Serb said. I think that's also what we all did. Yeah, in Paris, as you mentioned. For me, this time it was a little bit different in that I didn't really set any one-on-one meetings beforehand, but I think it's more due to the fact that the vertical I was focusing on is like so small that I basically ran into every person like 5 to 10 times within the week. So there's like literally no way to miss each other. So yeah, I think like this time it was different for me, but usually, yeah, that's the way to do it. And I feel like it's also a prioritization thing, right? So if you want to maintain a relationship or grow it stronger, you should probably set up a one-to-one meeting. Or if it's like a high value client partner, whatever, you should probably also do that. And then for like the other people, you can just meet at certain events, and that still works. Because yeah, like if you don't know beforehand that you have a good fit, you can also just leave the conversation at an event. But if you have booked like 30 minutes meeting, then you might feel like you're wasting your time, which is already like very scarce during a conference. But yeah, I think that's usually how I approach it. And also one thing I do before the conference starts is I just use Twitter search because most people that attend the conference will put it into their profile name, right? So you can just search on Twitter, and maybe you see some people that you always wanted to reach out, or just that are generally like interesting, and just DM them there. I think that's like a good way to increase your network and not just meet people that you already know or have an intro to, but just like completely random people. I did that in the past, and it's actually really good. Like I met people that I would have never met otherwise. So you kind of get out of your cluster in a way, and you can also be the person that basically bridges two clusters of people together like that, which is like a variable connection. It's like the bridge, but not for blockchains, but for personal networks. Yeah, so you can accrue value basically.
That's actually a really good point. I was in a meeting with somebody who was building something in the AI plus blockchain space, and the day before I had the meeting with the indexing company who does on like indexing for on-chain data, and he just walked by, and I was like, okay, you should meet each other because you need data and because you need to train your AI on that, and he provides good quality data. So it's great that also like during the conference you can connect people, but of course you have to follow up on a lot of topics too afterwards. So that's probably what we'll be doing in the next few weeks too. And I think we should go towards the most important topic, which is actually what we learned or what excited us during this conference. So maybe Chilla, you can kick it off, and feel free to talk about like any topic or person you met that you thought was interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. So actually, probably the thing that most interested me during the conference. So I listened to a speech, actually a panel that was handled by Vitalik, and there were like the top layer twos, like Scroll, Optimism, ZK Sync, Polygon, and these ones, and they were discussing about decentralization from a more technical point of view, and of course technical knowledge has limits. So, well, anyways, the key point is that so far nobody's really decentralized, and everybody that says so is basically lying, and it's fine, it's okay, because we still have to upgrade our tech in order to reach that point. But this is from a technical point of view, and then I had some great discussions about decentralization in terms of DAOs, so in terms of governance. And of course, we know that Arbitrum is probably the best example of this, because there are a lot of discussions going on. Actually, there were also some internal discussions in Istanbul with some governance players in Arbitrum, and it was great. So I spoke with some guys, like for instance with Castle Capital. They provide some great content on Arbitrum, on everything that is going on Arbitrum, and about governance as well. There are some pretty intriguing points about these political games that are going on, and I think that establishing like a basis, like a first understanding of what governance means and what decentralization means in these terms probably is so important, because maybe in the next 10 years, let's say, we will have some L1s or L2s that is going to be so powerful. There is going to be an infrastructure so powerful that maybe, even countries or politicians and powerful people will have a say in these blockchains. So uh, it's so important to start right now to create a pipeline, a structure to actually have a decentralized governance that can work in critical times later on in the next few years. So yeah, I think that we are going there. There's some great discussions going on, and yeah, it's great to see this.
On the DeFi and infrastructure side, I think that the space, especially, as I'm very focused on the bridging ecosystem and everything that means swaps, the industry is kind of going into an intent-based system for dexes, for bridges, and also for any kind of on-chain actions out there. Obviously, intents are not something new. This industry, crypto, has this talent of reinventing the wheel and just putting new names on stuff that was here before, especially from the TradFi. The RFQ model has been here, for many years. I know that many market makers will not agree with the fact that intents are some sort of RFQ models, whereas in some market makers do think that is exactly that. But yeah, in crypto we had CowSwap for a long time around, so which is an intent based DEX 1-inch fusion RFQ model. So nothing actually new, but one Uniswap X actually, I think, kickstarted the spring for intents out there, and a lot of infrastructure is moving and shifting towards intent based systems. So that means that you have solvers and not market makers, and a solver is basically a research company that is aggregating any kind of liquidity from dexes, dex aggregators, their own liquidity, and with UniX, even from centralized exchanges, and they will give you a quote and solve for that quote via their own networks of liquidity, whichever they might be. So that was probably the hottest topic for me. Yeah, I'm trying to think, of other DeFi or infrastructure. Staking was also big. There was the staking summit where, Eigenlayer, Lido, and Rocket Pool, all the big staking or projects that are in that ecosystem. I think that a lot of companies are targeting that by either trying to partner with them or build things on top of those staking providers. I think ETH 2.0 was actually quite a big success, and companies like Lido were truly visionary about how they saw this playing out, and now they're the market leader. So again, being early in crypto pays incrementally better than just being smart. As there we have other teams right now that are popping off with other uh, liquid staking solutions, which they might have arguably better tech or a better uh, approach to staking, but Lido is still the market leader for a reason. They have probably a pretty good decentralized system, which I know that many argue that they don't, but it works, and they were the first and the most reputable company out there, or DAO, because they're a DAO right now. Yeah, so I guess that this was it for me. I wasn't really that involved in the gaming and the NFT space. To be honest, I haven't seen much about NFTs. I did see a lot of gaming events, but nothing about NFTs at Devconnect.
Yeah, so I want to comment on the intents. I saw a lot of that being mentioned too. There were quite some builders who made the joke, yeah, intents is basically still limit orders that can be picked up, or like RFQ systems, which still is true. Like we've had that for a few years now. But I think I hope the intent ideology won't die down, and we keep building that, where we say like, okay, the user has an intent to swap just E to USDC, or even like E to stables, and then they just mention that intent without like actually caring about bridging or on what chain it lives. They just do that transaction, and we abstract away quite a lot of the steps that we still have to do, and a lot of the understanding you need to have of the blockchain. But not only of that, like maybe also about like the security, like which layers are more secure, or which tokens are more secure, that we as a community can come up with automation or like judgments that live on chain and then can be used for decision making. So I have high hopes for the intent space, but I feel that right now the focus is a little bit too much. Like we just call an exchange that has an RFQ intents, but it could be so much more. And I think it also plays a little bit into the narrative that we need to build better UX for like less experienced crypto users, which maybe also plays into like account abstraction, which I think is also important for onboarding new users. So you can have like a smart contract, which is a wallet, and then the user can trigger that smart contract with various other wallets or different actions, so they can automate some stuff in their portfolio, or don't have to use 10 wallets but only use one as a main entry point. Yeah, so I have hope that the UX will improve, but I saw some good projects and talks on that. But I also want to talk a little bit about the autonomous world. So Kepler, you went to these autonomous world / gaming events. Could you tell a little bit like what specifically is the autonomous worlds? What are narratives in that ecosystem, and who is building something interesting there?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I feel like similar to intents, it's kind of difficult to clearly define autonomous worlds right now. Like everyone is just trying to build in there. But I feel like there are like different factors where you could say, okay, this makes something more or less of an autonomous world. So definitely composability. So something like, okay, you have a game and others can extend it basically and tap into it. And the good thing is when you have everything fully on chain, it's not just like, oh, you can see, oh, this item is on chain, so I can basically, a player can use this item in another game, but you can, for example, say, oh, we have this game state that we can tap into, for example, right? So you can kind of see it like as modding, but with way more tools for yourself. And there's like there's some discussions if this composability has to be permissionless or if it can be permissioned in a way. And basically, this whole kind of, I guess, finding your own identity stuff now with, okay, what really makes an autonomous world? But I think, like one of the main things is composability, extensibility. The other part is persistence. So because you host something on a blockchain, like the developer can shut down the server and the game can live on when the game studio is already insolvent, for example, right? So when you only have the NFT on chain, if the game dies, your NFT is, I mean, maybe worth nothing. Maybe it's like a nice memorabilia that people are willing to pay for, but it has no utility anymore. So autonomous worlds, so fully on-chain games, you can always use, like they will stay online. That's a good thing. It's like comparing like trading card games, physical trading card games with online trading card games, right? Like if Hearthstone shuts down, your Hearthstone cards are dead because they also live on a centralized server. But if, for example, Pokemon stops producing new cards, you can still play the old cards, like physical cards. You still own them. I feel like that's a good analogy for it. So what I felt like was that the industry is kind of developing the right mindset again. I feel like there are always 3 stages. Like the first stage is, we can put something on the blockchain, so let's just do it and see how we can do it and what the challenges are and what we can create out of it. And then usually you get to the second stage where it's like, oh, but why should we even put it on chain? Like, how big is the target market? How do we monetize that? And stuff like that, which kind of like limits your ideas to what's already out there, like, for example, mobile games or AAA games, stuff like that. And then the third stage, which is what I got from this conference, is, I mean, this may be important in the future, but for now, let's just keep exploring. I feel like that's where autonomous worlds are at the moment, like just like, fuck it, we just explore it, like fuck around, find out phase. And Hilmar gave a good talk at the conference as well. So he's like behind ETH Online, basically, right? And they are also now building in this whole world of fully on-chain games, because that's also what he said. Like basically have a persistent world that doesn't die when his game studio dies. That's basically his goal with it. And he compared the whole industry we are in right now with like developers in Finland in like the late 90s, early 2000s. Like they just built like 3D games when no one was like really caring about them. But they just experimented, and this is how they became experts. And that's why there's like still a strong Finnish development culture, game development culture. And like they like, looking at how small the country is, they had a very big impact on mobile games, for example, right? So I feel like that's more of like the thinking, okay, we just try stuff and see what works over time. And David added to Hilmar's point as well during a panel. So David also has been working on like games for, I don't know, 30 years or so. And he's also building fully on-chain game at Playmint, which is his new game studio basically. And what he said, it's the most interesting area of gaming, just because when you look at everything else, like AAA games, indie games, mobile games, they're basically all the red ocean, right? They're so competitive. Of course, they're like competitive in different ways. Like mobile, it's usually just because you need to run performance marketing, and that's quite quite a hard thing to do. And AAA, of course, it's just that development costs are insanely high. Like there's so much risk in there, and that for him, he feels like fully on-chain games, they're like this blue ocean, right? So it's like you can try different stuff. You don't have to be ultra competitive at the start. You can cooperate with other game studios and just work together. And like the only thing we don't know is it really an ocean? Like how big it is? Is it like it could be a lake? But there would still be companies that are successful within that like small market. But it's not something that people should worry about for now. Like just try different stuff and come up with game design that is different from everything else. Like just basically what fits into crypto and like the users that are there right now. And if that's something that is interesting to outsiders as well, they will come in. That's basically like the main thing I got from it. So there were a lot of builders. They also presented their games. And I feel like the other second largest group probably was infrastructure companies. So talking to them, basically what I got out of these conversations was that they see fully on-chain games as like a perfect test bed kind of for their tech, because you need high throughput, low latency. So like all the layer twos are basically generalized and pretty much the same, but for games it's different, right? Like for fully on-chain games, you, for example, need a tick rate, or you need cross-chain communication because you want to tap into the state of another game, stuff like that. So they were also represented there, and I feel like some of these infrastructure companies might just provide more grants to fully on-chain games, because for VCs it's very hard to invest in it right now. I think infrastructure companies that are usually well funded can take on some of these functions of VCs, because for them, they basically have a test net for their tech. They can get good case studies out of it. Like if you're doing a fully on-chain game, you have a lot of activity on the network, right? Like every transaction, all of that stuff. So I feel like that's where the industry is right now. So basically early start, people understand that they can just try stuff out, whatever they are interested in. And I think like in the next probably 6 to 12 months, we'll see a lot of more experiments, and just by sheer luck, like one of them will be successful, and then we will see like the actual bull run, I guess, in fully on-chain games.
I also enjoyed the Autonomous Worlds events, and it was interesting to see those experienced builders actually going to a technology that would limit them more in some aspects, but they saw the potential and maybe will design new ways to interact with games or new game mechanics. That's where they think this is interesting, because it will probably bring crypto gaming or gaming in itself further. And I thought that was also like the vibe of the conference. Like let's experience an experiment together, what we're building here. And it ignores the critique from, I think, what I sometimes see on Twitter about crypto gaming, that it just looks worse, or the game mechanics are very basic. But I think we will see those new game mechanics that we haven't seen before, and maybe sometimes it will stretch the definition of what a game actually is. I think there was a statement that tokenomics and essentially also crypto trading can be seen as a game, which I fully agree with. but it's also an open system, and I think that composability is the same for DeFi as for the autonomous worlds. It just is happening in a different form.
Yeah, maybe
so-
to add,
Yeah, go ahead.
yeah, if you can just quickly add to one point. What you said is like the critique you see, oh, for example, it doesn't look as good as other games. I feel like that's like an issue a lot of people have when they see something new. So when you have a really disruptive innovation, you don't really, you shouldn't compare it on like factors that already exist, right? Like usually how a new technology gets adoption is by offering something new that wasn't possible before. So by comparing it on criteria that you use for like old tech, you don't really capture what the new tech is about. So yeah, I mean, that doesn't just apply to autonomous worlds, but yeah, it's definitely like a problem there that people have in like rightly, like how to evaluate it basically. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think some people that know more about gaming history, especially digital gaming, understand that well. Where, for example, when arcade halls came up, eventually after that, I think there were a lot of home consoles. But people thought, like, why do I want a home console if I can just go to an arcade hall, right? Like, but eventually it turned into newer types of games that maybe were multiplayer, or what we see right now, you can play it from your home but still play it online with a lot of people. So that nobody back then could imagine that would be possible, and we would do that basically, and that the arcade halls would go away. So but it opens up new mechanics, which can be revolutionary in itself. For example, I think in the last few years we saw 100 people coming into a game server and then doing a battle royale. Well, that wasn't possible before, but because people experiment with the technology and push it further, now we have these new types of games. So yeah, please keep experimenting, I would say. There's probably something that will be fun and that will come out of that. We just don't know how big that will be. It won't replace traditional gaming, but it not yet, at least. So and maybe I can share a little bit like what I learned at the hackathon. So at the same time, there was the ETHGlobal hackathon. Actually, at the end of the week, it started on the Friday, and for people who don't know what a hackathon is, because I had to explain it to a few friends of mine, it's basically you go there with a team of maximum 5 people, but you can also go solo if you like, and you build a project within 36 hours. And that actually means for some people that they are awake for almost that whole time, or maybe sleep maximum a few hours at the conference center and just continue coding or working on their pitch decks. But in those few, like 2 days, basically, you build a project from scratch, but you can integrate the partners that are there. And so it can be like an L1 or an L2, or some specific functionality. For example, there was a Safe who had an account abstraction SDK, so you could add account abstraction to your app. Or we also used the Web3 Inbox SDK from Wallet Connect, which made it possible to send messages to another wallet. And with those technologies, you can combine them in an app, and then you can create like a different dApp, or a new type of smart contract, or a new flow that we haven't seen in crypto. So, and then you can submit your project at the end, which is quite stressful because the servers went down at the end too. And people have to upload like videos and pictures and descriptions. But luckily they extended the deadline a little bit, because they don't want to disappoint a lot of builders that been building really hard in those days. But In total, there were like more than 1,300 builders. I think they submitted more than 400, I think 26 projects. So yeah, that's a lot. And then you can win prizes from like the global jury, which you pitch to, and then for each partner that you integrated, who you also pitch to after the submission deadline. So yeah, I think I had a blast. It was awesome to see people really going for a project, trying to stretch like their attention and body limits to just get it done. And yeah, I think it's worth taking a look at the ETHGlobal website to see what people have built, who are the winners are. On YouTube, you can watch the opening and closing ceremony, so you can see the energy of the crowd. And it's basically all builders or people in BizDev that need to translate what the builders built to the juries. That just went absolutely nuts in a good way. So yeah, I can definitely recommend, even if you don't have programming skills, but maybe sales skills, or you're a designer, to just hop on ETHGlobal and sign up for the next hackathon. I think we should also chat a little bit about Istanbul itself. I think it was a nice city, very different food than what we are used to. The taxi drivers were also nuts, or in general, the traffic is very chaotic. Yeah, so what did you think about Istanbul? Feel free to jump in.
Great city, man. Like Istanbul has such a huge cultural heritage. You can see that there are two worlds there. The food is great. I recommend to anyone going there to try the lamb. It's different from anything you ever tried. The taxis, as you said, Abe, they're a mess. I had one Uber driver canceling on me mid-ride, and I specifically told him that I don't have any cash after I saw him cancel my ride on the app and on his phone. And he said, yeah, it's fine. And long story short, we ended up in a fight in the hotel lobby, and one of the guys from the hotel was trying to mediate all this because I was on for paying by card, but and settle within the app, but I I didn't want to get scammed. Eventually, after 15 minutes of yelling at me and trying to scam me, he just left. So yeah, be prepared to be targeted by people who are not that well intentioned, but I won't generalize that about Istanbul. There are a lot of nice people, like especially the ones that are building in crypto. They were all nice with everyone, with tips and tricks on how to get around the city, where are the best places to grab a bite, to have a drink, or just to visit. But yeah, Istanbul is a great city, and I think that just a few days as a tourist are not enough. Like you should spend like a whole week there just to explore the city. I think there are 15 million people in Istanbul, so it's a huge city. You can't get it done in like a city break.
Yeah, and I think on the taxis, that's I learned luckily on the first day already that you have to negotiate that beforehand if you have cash, but you'll end up more expensive than like what you would expect, which is I think still fairly cheap for like Western standards. But I think that there's some like duality in Istanbul, like that taxi driver, you might feel like, oh, he's trying to scam me, but also like midway during the ride he's going to offer you a cigarette because like they're also that social. So I felt the same in restaurants. Like sometimes the waiters were like very direct, like, no, we don't have that, without any like excuses or anything. But if you tipped or just without tipping, they would bring you like after your meal a Turkish tea or would be very friendly. So yeah, in a way, it was sometimes a little bit more extreme, but definitely fun, and especially if that extremeness is on the polite side, it's such a wonderful place to be. And Chilla, what did you think of Istanbul?
Yeah, first of all, next time I will follow Cerberus playbook because yeah, he knows a lot about going to events, and yeah, I will have more experience as well. So actually, one thing that I suggest to people is to go maybe a couple of days, well, 3 days before at least, depending on the size of the city, to go around, like travel a little bit to see the city. Because one of the problems that I had is that I only visited the city like half a day, and only went to a mosque and yeah, somewhere else. And yeah, anyways, it was great, a lot of cultural history. Uh, yeah, it was very funny because every I felt like everybody was trying to scam me every time, and taxis, of course, basically always. So I had to negotiate a lot with taxists, and yeah, it was actually fun in the end, just to always negotiate with taxis. And but it was great. I mean, it's a very big city, so many cats that I'm very much allergic to. So it was actually it actually became a joke because everybody was like playing with cats around the streets, and I was like, yeah, I cannot. I'm sorry, but I just cannot go near them because I would die like immediately. But it was everything was beautiful. I'm glad that I was able to join the conference and see Istanbul, even though I will probably have to go another time to actually visit it properly.
Yeah, it's a lively city. Like at the start, I was a little bit overwhelmed, I have to say, but it grew on me over time. It might also be because when I arrived, I of course took the taxi from the airport and got scammed like everyone else. But yeah, overall, I enjoyed it. I think the events were close enough to each other, but they weren't like as close as like ETHCC, for example. So you still had to plan for like a 20 to 30-minute walk usually, but that's actually a good way to see the city. So I felt like, yeah, I think I got enough, like not really enough of the city, but I was there in like April for a weekend, so I already know the city. But it was nice to see like another area than I was in before.
Yeah, so yeah, I think Istanbul was also a really vibrant city. It's so energetic. So I really, when I got home, I always had trouble sleeping because there was just so much energy. And I love the cats too. Made a lot of pictures, and they bring a good vibe to the city. Maybe we should do a round of like closing thoughts that we in general had about Istanbul or the conference. Like mine is like Devconnect. I think 2 years back we went to Devconnect 2 in Amsterdam. Is such a quality event. There is so much like good stuff in this space, especially connecting to these builders, connecting to these projects is what you can do at Devconnect. And for me, like the hackathon was also great. So I'll probably join another one next year when I finally have caught up on some sleep too. And I heard at the ETHGlobal hackathon that hackathon, the Devconnect one, will be in Southeast Asia. So yeah, we can already start speculating on where that will be. But my hope is on Vietnam. So because that's like an up and coming crypto hub there. But we'll see. But I can definitely recommend going there. And if you are going to another conference, just let us know. We are always happy to catch up with you. Cerberus, what are your closing thoughts?
Well, my closing thoughts are that Devconnect is probably one of the top three crypto events for builders. So if you're not sure which conference to pick, because there are probably way too many out there in the world, DevConnect should definitely be on the short list, mainly because it's so research and builder focused. And I'm now speaking from the DeFi builder perspective. If you have more like a TradFi product or a retail product, maybe it shouldn't be your go-to, but still it's so good for building relationships with the right people in the space. So DevConnect was great. Istanbul is a great city, and this is what I like about DevConnect, that it's always happening in another place. I think that the last one was in Europe. This one was in Turkey, and looking forward to the next one.
Yeah, I think I have a similar view. It's very builder centric, and I feel like just from the presentations you see, the talks and the panels, I would probably say it's the best conference I've attended yet, just purely from that perspective. I think next time I want to stay a little bit longer, also to just see what's happening in like non-gaming verticals like DeFi, which I'm still interested in, account abstraction, all of these. And probably I would join Ape next time for the hackathon. Because I like the project you developed.
Yeah, great. So my key takeaway is probably that unless you're, a top secret trader or shadowy supercoder, you should go to conferences because it's a great way to meet people, to of course to network with people. But it depends on your interests. But it is great just to see how we are growing as an industry, because after all, we are still so we are still so small relatively to other industries, and it's great to see how we are growing, and there's so many people, so many smart people that are building in the industry. So yeah, I'm positive about conferences, and I still have to check out the other ones, but great so far.
Thanks. It was good sharing these experiences with you in Istanbul and on this episode. For everybody listening, make sure you follow each one of us, because we will be sharing some more info and maybe some insights about what we've seen on our Twitters. And of course, follow the DeusXDAO page too for more DeusXDAO podcasts. So thank you for listening, and see you around.
Thanks for tuning in to the DeusXDAO podcast, a place where some of the most progressive and innovative builders, thought leaders, and traders in the crypto space come together to discuss all areas of the crypto industry. Whether you're into DeFi, Layer 1s, Layer 2s, NFTs, or anything in between, we've got you covered. And as a reminder, nothing said on this podcast should be construed as financial advice or as a solicitation to buy or sell any digital asset or security. The comments, views, and opinions expressed by the hosts or guests on the podcast are their own. As always, you'll need to do your own research.